Hello my friends and welcome back to Short Story Long. This week we are sitting down with Erica Mandy. Erica Mandy has a podcast and it's called theNewsWorthy and it's very successful and she does it out of her home here in California. The best part is that she's from Kansas City. She worked her way all the way up through the ranks as a news reporter, doing her own stories, researching and reporting the news. And finally, after all of these different benchmarks, she decided to go out on her own and start a podcast from home and is more successful than ever. And that is exactly what this show is about and what we like to talk about. So, in this week's episode, we're going to go through her story. We're going to hear about the ups and downs, when she was scared, when she was not scared, and when she had the big breakthroughs.
The hardest part is figuring out what you want to master.
Focus on your product.
Can you tell somebody that they suck?
You gotta just go for this is exactly what I want to do for a living.
You can't even tell somebody that their breath is life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Short Story Long. This week, we have Erica Mandy.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I will tell you that on this podcast, I'm trying, and I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but I'm trying to find the right balance of researching you just enough so that I don't sound like a complete idiot, but also not leaving so much open so that you can fill in the gaps for me and I can genuinely ask the questions, right?
Yeah.
So I was reading this morning sort of your overview, and I'm really excited to get into it because it's really impressive and you've accomplished a lot of things.
Thank you.
And that's really cool.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to sort of hear the story. So, what else I always do is I start from childhood. Where are you from?
I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas City, a
I'm
suburb.
from Ohio.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was a typical Midwest suburb on the Kansas side of Kansas City.
That's so confusing.
I know.
That whole
Everyone's like,
thing.
well, is that Missouri or is that
Yeah.
Kansas?
One of our retailers is the Buckle, and they're in they have offices in Kansas and in Kansas City. And the first time I went there, I remember being so confused and I felt so dumb.
And I lived right next to state lines, so it didn't really matter to me, but it's fun to say I'm from Kansas
Yeah.
because people are like, what, Kansas? Do you have phones? Like, what is, and I'm like, yes, it's normal. I, lived near Kansas City.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so Kansas, I lived in a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri on the Kansas side. That's how I say it.
So much Kansas. What was sort of, did you have brothers and sisters?
One older brother, and
Yeah.
actually my husband is one of his best friends.
Really?
Yeah.
How convenient.
I
Does he
know.
live out here now too? Or
He loves family get-togethers now because he just can hang out with his best friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dream come true.
Yeah, no, my brother lives in Denver.
Got it.
Yeah, and my parents are still in Kansas City.
And what what type of things do you do there growing up? Like what did life look like?
So, yeah, it was a very typical suburb. We would go to the movies as a kid and like
Mm-hmm.
house parties. And I did every activity under the sun
Mm-hmm.
growing up. So, I did gymnastics, dance, piano, softball, basketball. And then there's definitely that time when you're like, okay, I need to pick and choose here
Yeah.
because it's getting insane.
Yeah.
So, I was big into dance and I did the whole dance team thing in high school. And so that was a lot of my time. And
Yep.
yeah.
And what was that your natural instincts telling you to pick and choose? Like you think just as you got older, you're like, okay, I can't literally do everything, or
Well, if you're gonna do something well,
Mhm.
you can't do it all, right?
Mhm.
So it was for me, I was doing like literally going from dance class to gymnastics practice and then practicing piano when I got home.
yeah,
And so at some point it was like, okay, I really love dance. And I remember this one time I got into the car because at the time my mom was still driving me around.
yeah,
And I got in the car after dance class and I was like, I don't want to go to gymnastics. Like
Yeah.
it was just that, like, and
Just
she's
a
like, well, you're
moment.
almost done with the month. I'm like, no, I'm done.
yeah.
So it was just that moment of I love dance, and if something isn't to that level, then I'm gonna let it drop.
Yeah, that's smart. What type of like input did your parents give on sort of your ambitions or your hobbies, or were they like not controlling, but were they like did they very opinionated about it, or did they let you just kind of do whatever you wanted, or how was that? How did that go?
They were always the people that said, do the best you can, and I
Yeah.
don't care as long as you're trying your hardest
Yep.
and you can do anything you want to. Which in some aspects can be scary because you're like, I can do anything?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, they showed by example that work is important and you have to be committed to it and you can do, whatever you want.
Yeah. What did they do?
So my mom was a kindergarten teacher,
Mhm.
and my dad worked in the car business, and he kind of did every aspect of the car business, from management to owning his own dealership to just sales. And now he's just doing sales because he's like, less stress. I can make as much money as I want,
Yeah.
depending. But again, he would work Saturdays because that was the big, day for the car dealership and stuff. And so it was just never a question of, oh, I have to go into work. It was, okay, this is what I do, and work's
Yeah.
important. And then when it was time for me to get a job, it was, I got to take it really seriously. And, when I was working in high school, it was important.
That's cool. Did they grow up in Kansas also?
No, my dad's from Tennessee. My mom's from St. Louis.
And why Kansas? Was that a work thing?
My dad was living there. I'm actually not even sure why. And so
Okay.
once they met, my mom moved from St. Louis to Kansas City.
How interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question. I should ask my dad that.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
I
One
think it
thing
was
that
work.
as I get deeper into these things and have more of these conversations, I really have sort of become fascinated with like tracking back why people have. I'm big on mindset, right? And I think that so much of this stuff and what makes someone independent and hardworking and blah 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 is a lot of the mindset that was ingrained in them early on. And so I always try to wrap my head around like, well, were the parents more focused on work or were they more focused on these things? And try to like piece the whole story together if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, again, it was them just work was a thing that you do and you do it well.
Yeah.
And when it was like, okay, you need to get a summer job, I took it really seriously. And I was like the best. First I worked at actually a car dealership as the service receptionist.
Yeah.
And so I was going to be the best service receptionist that there
Yeah.
ever was. And then I worked at a beauty retail store and I was going to sell, my ass off on that.
Yeah.
And then at Nordstrom and then that translated into doing my best in internships, which then translated into getting my first job.
Yeah.
And so it kind of is that cycle.
That's cool. That's I would say like at its most basic level, that's a really good trait to try to embed in your children. Do you have kids?
No.
Yeah, I just think like that's a meaning there. But I think that one day, like just to do your best at whatever, even if you're not sure what it is. Because a lot of
Yeah.
people now also write me and stuff on Instagram and whatever. And one of the biggest questions is like how to find your passion and how to find your thing, right? And I think that simply trying a lot of stuff, but doing your best at all of them is a really key element in that. I
Exactly.
think a lot of people like sit and wait and say, well, I'll do my best when I find my thing. But
You have
until
to
then,
do to find your thing.
yeah.
So I definitely, like, I did an internship with MTV, and you're
Mhm,
familiar with
mhm.
MTV. And I realized through that internship that I didn't want to do entertainment.
Yep.
And that's how I ended up getting into news.
Yeah.
And I was also studying journalism, but that just checked that box for me that, okay, I thought I wanted to work for an MTV, but that's no longer what I want to do.
Yeah. How long did you work there?
Just a summer. It was a
So it
summer
only took a summer
internship.
for you to be like,
Yeah.
nope, this is not it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's good.
No, I loved it. Don't get me wrong, but it
Yeah.
was just like, okay, I don't think that's the path I want to go down. Let me try an internship in broadcast news.
Yeah. But you said you were logging the dailies, right? Kind of just like
Yeah, like
just
all the
logging
raw
all the
footage,
footage from
because
Teen Mom.
Yeah, so it's kind of reality style, right?
Yeah.
So they have to get so much footage and then pick the best moments. And so as an intern, I was sitting there logging hours of video of teenage girls because I worked for My Super Sweet 16, if
Yeah.
anyone remembers
Oh,
that show.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it was all these basic, rich, spoiled,
Sounds
but
terrible.
wonderful people who were throwing these big parties. And so it was cool because I kind of got to see behind the scenes. Like
Yeah.
there was one time a producer was pulling some information out, like, oh, you can just tell her later you were you're going to say something bad about her. It's fine. Just tell her I made you.
Yeah.
And so then they would actually say it.
That's
Um,
amazing.
Which I'm sure doesn't happen every time. But no, it was.
You're so nice about it,
I know.
I'm sure that's not how they do it. That's how they do it.
Yeah, you would know more.
That's every episode.
You would absolutely know.
Yeah.
But these were teenage girls. So I literally was just using capital L for all the likes and YK for all the knows
Yeah.
because they would say like and every other word.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It was a really cool experience and it taught me. And then I also got to talk to the people who were in that job and what path they've been taking and what their life is like.
Yeah.
And that was key for me. Okay, I'm willing to work hard, but is that the path I want?
Yeah.
And so that's what's great about internships. You can try a couple different things.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's such a good mentality. When did you, going back a little bit, when did you get your first job? How old were you?
So I got an unpaid internship right out of college when I was 18. or no, not 18, 21.
Okay, so let me ask you this then first. So where did you go to college?
Indiana University.
Got it. And why there? And also, did you have any direction? Did you think you knew what you were going there for at the time?
Not when I first entered
Yeah.
school, but then it was like, okay, you got to pick your major. And so I thought about the things that I love to do. And it was talk to people and perform in a way because I grew up dancing.
Yep.
And so, and writing was always my passion over, math and science type thing.
Yep.
So I just kind of looked at the available majors and said, what do these skills translate to?
Yeah.
And so I was led to journalism.
Got it.
And then the school there kind of takes you through the path of, okay, here's magazine, newspaper, TV, all the different paths you can take journalism.
Yep.
And I fell in love with doing broadcast.
Really? And that was like meaning being on camera.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a reporter.
Yeah.
So I still, and I think a lot of people don't realize this about TV news reporters, is that they are doing the majority of the work. Like nobody handed me a script. Nobody did my interviews for me. Like I
Yeah.
was doing it all. And so yes, being on camera is part of it, but it was a part of it. And it was
Yeah.
definitely not the whole thing.
No, of course. I think that's a part about that job that a lot of people underestimate,
Yeah.
and like I know, because I know some people that do that, and like the amount of work and preparation that goes into it, I can't imagine. I mean, like I was telling you before we started, when I first started doing this podcast, I would get anxiety, and that's like one thing. All I have to do is talk to one person with very little research, and I wasn't even doing it on camera when I first started. But like all the layers of having to have the information, have everything planned out, be on camera, look good, look happy, carry the conversation. Like there's a lot to it.
Yeah. Especially when you're under deadline. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
put that lipstick on. Go, go.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is give me the timeline of like obviously when you worked at the car dealership, that was before college.
Yeah, that was in high school.
Okay.
So then I did internships in college. And after college, I still had not done an internship at an actual TV news station.
Yep.
And so I thought, I really need to do that before I can get my foot in the door because it really is a competitive industry.
Yeah.
And so I did one more internship in my hometown of Kansas City. I took a lot of initiative, to be honest. And somebody gave me a tip, like, make sure you ask for what you want to do because no one's going to hold your hand during this internship. So
Yeah.
I would say, hey, can I go out on a story with you? And I would write my own scripts
Yeah.
after the story that would never make air, but I was just practicing. And so people recognized that in me, and a photographer there ended up recommending me to his old boss, or an old station he used to work at.
Yep.
He knew the boss at the time. And I got an interview and I got hired on the spot after that interview. But it was a small town. It was Columbia, Missouri now.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of between Kansas City and St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I started as a part-time reporter making $10 an hour.
But how did you feel at the time? Did you feel like you were just killing it?
I was very scared. I
Yeah.
was very intimidated because, again, it's, now I'm not just going to be on TV for college. This is real.
The real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
It's
I
another
was-
thing I'm fascinated by is like sometimes those littler moments like mean more than as you get used to these achievements and these, you know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
almost don't hit you as hard. It's like it almost seems like your first couple seems so big and so scary and so like holy cow. And now looking back on it, it's like, oh, whatever, that was a cool little thing,
yeah, absolutely.
And it's just funny the sort of how your perception changes as you move through the different levels.
Yes. When I got that first job, it was a really big deal. And now I look back and I'm like, it was Market 135
Yeah.
in like the middle of Missouri.
Yeah.
But it was huge for me at the
Yep.
time. And I learned a lot from that whole gig. So I started as a part-time reporter and then left 4 years later as the main anchor. So it
So
was
cool.
a good experience.
What do you think allowed you to move through from part-time to main anchor? Like, is there anything you can sort of attribute why you were able to do that? What set you ahead of everyone else?
I think it was a combination of the work ethic and
Mhm.
being willing to work weekends or whatever it was, because I didn't jump from part-time reporter to main anchor.
Yeah.
It was 6 months of being a part-time reporter. Then I got full-time. Then I got weekend anchor and producer.
Mhm.
So I was like doing the shows myself and then anchoring them. And then eventually I got main anchor. So I think part of it was just like the commitment.
Yeah.
I was in Columbia for that job and nothing, going out with friends or whatever, I'll do it when I have time. But like, if they want me to do something, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I would have lived in like Chicago or something,
Yeah, of
somewhere else
course.
more fun and
Yeah.
big. And I love Columbia, don't get me wrong. But, and then I think it was the just not, I mean, when I had left college, I knew that I loved this and that I could do it. I had potential.
Yeah.
And so I think it was my boss recognizing potential in me.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think when you find the thing, when you find the thing that really clicks with you, it's almost like there's nothing that will get in your way of like focusing on that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's something also that I try to figure out how to lead people to find that thing of their own, because I think that's like the key to happiness, right? Is
Yeah.
that having a thing. But I do think, like you said, I really think the closest advice that I have to it is to try a million things, and eventually one thing will click, and then you know what I mean, and then you attack that. But you only know from trial and error, I think.
And I think while I was in it, I
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily happy.
Yeah, yeah, that's a
Because,
good
yeah,
point to make.
yeah.
You know,
Because I was working crazy hours. I was stressed out about being on TV for the first time. And, I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, there's literally one day that I remember I was at the Capitol building all day, doing all my own camera equipment.
yeah,
And I got back and I was under deadline and I just was bad. And I got in front of the camera that didn't have a teleprompter and the anchors pitched to me. And I literally said, back to you. And I was
like the
like,
classic moment.
yeah. And I'm so glad YouTube wasn't really big at the
Yeah,
time.
darn it.
Because I'm sure that would have made the rounds.
Yeah.
But it was, it was those mistakes that I had to make in a smaller town.
Yeah.
And that I went home crying and I was like, I'm never going to make it. But then I just came back the next day and I did another story and one day after the other. And then eventually, I made it to LA, which is the second largest news market in the country.
Yeah. How did you make that jump?
So I first went to Portland, Oregon
Okay.
after Columbia, which was still a pretty big jump. So in news, it's like market. So 135 to 22, and then LA's 2 and New York's 1.
And so, stupid question, that's simply their ranking on how big it is.
Yeah. So the viewership, that area, how
Yep.
many people are watching.
Got it.
So I was really excited to get the job in Portland, Oregon, because now I'm like a top 30. And that was a really great experience. So I was there for 3 years. And then after that, I
Can
kind
I
of,
ask, sorry,
sure.
can I ask how the opportunity in Oregon came about?
Yeah, I just applied.
Got it. So what, okay, let me ask you this. So then you're lead anchor, killing it in 135.
Right.
And so do you just send out like resumes to a bunch of different, is that like, what was the process? Do you go
Yeah.
top 1 through 50? I'm going to send everyone an application, or?
So for me, I'd gotten to a point after 4 years in Columbia, Missouri,
Mhm.
and it was a great experience. I was really ready to live in a city that I actually wanted to live in.
Yeah,
And
good
I
point.
had committed so much of my life to just grinding and, doing what I had to learn and make mistakes and get better.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I still want to do this, but I have to live somewhere where I'm a little bit happier.
Yeah.
And so I looked at some cities that I would actually want to live in, and you put together a reel. So all like your best stories, your best live shots, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I sent it out to I went to, there's like one website called tvjobs.com or something like that. And it had all the job openings at the time. And
Yeah.
so I would just pick ones that I was interested in. And I actually applied for a different job. I didn't hear from them. And then I heard from them later when they had a different opening.
Yeah.
And it worked out. But I was at a point where I was like, I'm going to live in another city no matter how much, because my boss at the time was like, oh, but I'll match what they're going to pay you.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I need to be challenged in a new way.
Yeah. And also enjoy your life a little,
Yeah.
I think. Like, I just think it's another thing is like, I'm all for the like, grind your face off and care about nothing else. But I do think as I've gotten older, I've started to understand and appreciate the value of enjoying your life here and there.
100%.
Like you have to. It's like
You
you have to
have
remind
to.
yourself why you're working so hard.
Which is what led me to Los Angeles, actually.
I like that. Okay,
Yeah.
so run me through Portland and then let's get to Los Angeles. Because it went
Okay.
Portland to Los Angeles? Okay, so then how'd the experience go at Portland? I guess one big thing is when you first got there, were you nervous all over again? Because now you're
Yes.
at like 20,
Yes, 22.
22.
And actually, I would say the jump from Columbia to Portland was more intense for me and like my emotions in the first 6 months than going from Portland to LA.
Yeah.
Because I went from a small market where you are allowed to make mistakes and everybody's kind of understanding, the audience is used to the people being right out of college, to a place that expects you to be at a higher level.
Yeah.
And so that was a little bit more stressful for me. But the thing I kind of took away from that moment was trust that when you get the job,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had the confidence in myself to not be so stressed out in the first 6 months because I could do it, and that's the reason I was there.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, it was great after that. I love Portland. It's a great city. They have like amazing food.
Yeah.
If you ever go, you have to go out to eat. It's all like local, organic,
Yeah.
creative stuff.
I've only been there for like hours at a time, and it just was very, once again, not to be negative about Portland, love you guys, but it was just overcast and like
Yes.
kind of dreary and a lot of coffee shops.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna get some coffee, I guess, and then I'm back to the airport. So not that
Yeah.
I don't, it seems great. It just seems like a very
Great.
specific type of person
Yeah.
to truly love it, like to be able to spend your life there.
And that was part of the reason I was ready to leave after
Yeah,
3
and you
years.
went to the
I
polar
loved
opposite,
it.
which is Los Angeles.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Which was the flip side. I was a little nervous about LA because I was like, I'm not the person to, I don't know, like want to be perfect at all times and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And am I going to fit in? And, once I moved here, I realized not everyone's really like that. But
Yeah. It's funny how we paint these like pictures of
yeah,
different areas. Like, I don't think I would fit there because I'm not, you know what I mean? And it's
right.
like there's all these little subcultures within every city, but that's how I feel too. I just judged the shit out of Portland. And I'm
I
sure
know.
that there's a way to live in Portland and not
Right.
be like a hipster with a beard and drink coffee, but
Right.
I'm judging.
But it's kind of like that.
Yeah, but kind of. But kind of not really. Was there ever moments in Portland when you felt like you definitely couldn't do it and you were out of your league?
I mean, other than the typical beginnings
Yep.
of just, oh my gosh, I hope I can do it. Honestly, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your like, did you have any support system, or what age were you when you moved to Portland?
So let's see. I would have been about 25 or 26.
Got it. And did you have any like support system? You talked to your parents a lot, a good friend, books. Did you have anything like that? Or was it just sort of your natural drive and confidence that was getting you through?
It was the media family that you build when you are and same thing goes for Colombia.
Yep.
When you go somewhere and don't know anybody and you're still all kind of young, you all become a family because you're in it together. When you're
Yeah.
doing something that kind of stinks, like bad hours, or, you all kind of get even closer.
Yeah.
And so definitely the people that I worked with and even people at other stations. So I have lifelong friends from both Columbia and Portland that are some of my best friends
Yeah.
from just the experiences that we had together. And we could relate in these crazy
Yeah.
stories that we were going out on and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. Okay. So how did the move to LA happen? How long were you in Portland?
I was there for 3 years.
3 years. And then, so how did that happen? Did you get stir crazy? You got sick of the clouds? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
So I felt like every year that goes by, I want to take my career and my life to the next level,
Yep.
right? And it's like, so I felt like I had done what I could do in Portland
Yep.
and I was ready to move on. And then I connected with my now husband
hmm
who already lived in Los Angeles. And I thought, I know that I want to move on. LA makes perfect sense for me
Yep.
because it is like kind of the ultimate goal, right? And he's already there. And so it was kind of that moment that I said, I'm going to do this both for my career, but also my personal life.
Yeah.
And now is the time. I had been doing it long enough where I said, I've got to pay attention a little bit to my personal life.
Yeah.
So it was perfect for me, but I still had to get the job. So I was visiting my now husband in Los Angeles, and I just sent out emails to all the news directors in LA, and I got a couple meetings, and I met with them. And long story short, I just said, once I get, I'm going to move to LA. I lied. And I said, I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to move to LA. And
Yeah.
they said, okay, once you move here, I'll give you a chance as a freelancer.
Yeah.
And so for the first time, I moved without having a job guaranteed.
Yeah.
And
Especially to LA. That's tough.
yeah, but I trusted myself that if I could get my foot in the door,
Yeah.
that I could prove myself
Yeah.
and that they would give me a job from there. And since I got that word that, okay, if you move, I'll give you a chance, I trusted in that and it worked out exactly as I had planned.
It's so good.
But
How
it
did it
was,
work? How did it happen? You got the freelance and then turned that into a job, or?
yeah, so I told him I'm moving and I'm going to want that freelance gig. And he said, let me know when you're here. And so
Yeah.
I moved. And then he said, okay, start in a couple weeks. And so I was a freelancer for 2 years,
Yeah.
but I was working, at least 4 times a week. So it was good. But it was less secure than a full job, full staff job. And then after 2 years, I got the contract.
Got
And then
it.
after 1 year as the contract, I quit.
Really? You just keep it
I
moving,
know,
huh?
I know.
So let me ask you this though. So you moved here, you're interning, and did you like fall in love with your husband at the same time? Like, was it like I'm in LA,
Yeah.
I found love, I'm killing it? Like you just leveled up
Yeah.
to the super next level?
It was a good year.
Man, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Because did you not have too many like serious relationships because you were so focused on work?
Correct.
That's cool. You won. You did a good job. Talk about like following your instincts and leveling up and winning. I mean, you did a great job.
It didn't feel like it in the moment, though. And I always like to emphasize that because, that whole process was a long one.
Yeah.
And it felt, when you're in it, you don't feel like, you're like, well, I'm never going to make it to LA. I
Yeah.
just said, back to you,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
how am I ever going to get to LA?
Yeah.
But then you just keep going.
Yeah.
And eventually you can look back and say, oh, yeah, that was like all for a purpose. But when
Yeah.
you're in it, it's harder.
That's so true. But it's all about like following your instincts and taking just the next step, and that's always so hard to do.
And I think for me, it's about trusting myself that I can handle it no matter what happens.
Yep.
So even if things don't go as planned, I'm going to be able to handle that. I'm going to be able to get another job if I have to go, if I go back to Portland or whatever it is, I can handle it. It's not going to be ideal.
Yeah.
But, and I think in order to take the calculated risk, you have to believe in yourself that you can handle the success and you can handle the failures.
Yeah. Did you have any backup plan? Like if you moved to LA and couldn't get a job to pay the bills, what you were going to do?
Yeah, I mean, my brother lives in Denver. If I
Okay.
really needed to, I could go live with them. My parents are in Kansas City. At the time I was dating Dan. But my worst case scenario was things didn't work out with Dan and I couldn't get a job. And
Yeah.
so my backup plan was find friends and family that I could stay with while I'm getting another job.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, okay, well, I had a job in Portland, so I can probably get a job in a city. And if I have to move for it, fine.
Yeah. You don't seem to have too much of a fear of failure.
I mean, it's
You know?
always there, but I don't let it stop me.
Yeah. It's just cool. You just seem to have some really good like built-in traits that sort of keep you moving forward. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
think a lot of
thanks.
people like won't make the move to LA because they're scared of, well, if I fail, then and rent's so expensive, and what do I do, and blah blah blah, and then you end up staying. I don't know. You just
Yeah.
self-destruct a little bit.
I think it depends on I think about if I'm in the same place that I am in now
Yep.
in 5 years.
Yep.
Am I going to be more or less happy than if I take the risk and fail?
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it was always about, I know I'm going to regret it if I don't try.
Mhm.
But, there were definitely times when I thought, oh, should I do something? And I don't end up doing it. I have to have that motivation. And for me, moving to LA was getting a better gig
Yeah.
career-wise and a better personal life, potentially,
Yeah.
if it worked out with Dan.
And better
so,
weather.
What?
I said, and better weather.
Yeah,
You
that,
know what I
that
mean?
definitely
That
helped.
alone, that alone is like, oh, this is worth it.
Yeah, and Dan already lived by the beach, so it was like,
So
move
nice.
by the beach, get sunny
Yeah,
weather,
like,
and maybe have a better career. Okay.
yeah, I'll take
I
the
guess.
risk. Yeah. When was it when you got the contract that you felt like you had made it in LA?
Yeah. Yes. It was like reaching that goal,
Yeah.
checking that box and saying, okay, what's next? And realizing that what's next on that path was no longer what I wanted. And that was the moment for me that I said, I need to do something else. And coming up with the idea for the Newsworthy, which is the podcast I do,
Yeah.
it was those two things that made me say, okay, I'm going to quit my job and go for this. And the feedback I've gotten so far with the Newsworthy has been so great that it's like, okay, I'm going to keep going until, just to
Yeah.
see what this can be.
Yeah. So a year in, you quit?
Well, I had been there a total of 3 years. So I
Yeah.
was a freelancer for 2 years, and then I got the contract. And so I did that year. And when I came up with the idea again for the Newsworthy, I mean, because I was hearing from honestly a lot of my friends and people that I know that they weren't watching the news.
Yeah.
They were consuming news in a different way.
Yeah.
And when I thought about even going to network and hitting that next level, it was no longer my aspiration. You know, it was no longer how I get the news. It
Yeah.
was no longer the types of stories I wanted to tell. And I kept hearing from people that news is too depressing. I
Yeah.
just tune it out,
Agreed.
or it's too biased. Everybody has an opinion, or it's time consuming, all those things. And so that's how I kind of landed with the Newsworthy. How can I create news that is quick, unbiased, and a little bit more fun, and you get a variety of stories so it's not so dang depressing.
Yeah.
And so when I started researching it while I was still working at LA or at CBS LA, I was getting really great feedback. Like I did a little survey, I talked to people about it, and I got really good feedback. And then I just became so passionate about it because I'm like, there's so much potential here. This doesn't exist right now. Like there's normal news podcasts that are
Yeah.
NPR style, and that's great, but not for everybody.
Yeah.
And then there's, online news that you have to sit down and actually read and spend your
Ugh,
time when you have a
gross.
million other things going on, right?
Yeah.
And still, some of that you're just getting one perspective from one organization.
Yeah.
And so I was like, nothing exists like this. I have to do it. So I did it.
That's crazy. It's so crazy too to me, like how you can set your kind of wildest dreams, which I would say for you sounded like moving to LA and getting a gig, right? And then like, within a couple years you can be like, what else? You know what I mean? And it's like you
Yeah. Isn't that
accomplished,
funny?
yeah, like your wildest dreams when you were back in Colombia, right?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't take long before you're like, how could I evolve out of this? You know what I mean?
Right. And I think it's because you always build it up in your head.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get there, it's great, but nothing that much has changed. You still want to go to the next level. You still want to do something else.
Yeah, it's so true. Okay, so then you start. That's the reason why this part is so interesting to me too. How long ago was it that you quit and started your
So I
show?
quit in June.
Just this June.
Yeah. In 2017.
Holy cow.
And then I launched the Newsworthy in August.
Okay, so I guess the part that I want to wrap my head around is like, isn't it insanely scary and risky, way more so than moving to a different city or any of that stuff, because you're changing to your own platform and trying to, like, how did you sort of plan out how you were going to get paid or how you were going to make a living off of this?
Yeah. So yes, but I think it's all about timing.
Okay.
So for me, I had taken the steps I needed to get my chops in journalism and build that credibility. And then I had reached that 10-year mark of saying, okay, I have that. What else can I do? So then when I thought about doing the Newsworthy, it was the right time in my life in the fact that I was in LA. I had just gotten married.
Yeah.
And so I could sit down with my husband and say, okay, I have this much money saved. How much money do you have saved? Like,
Yeah.
let's put this in. Do we want to invest in this? Let's give it a year.
Uh-huh.
And so it was looking at just honestly the money we've saved and giving myself the time to experiment.
Yeah.
And, if my husband wanted to turn around and experiment after I get the chance, then
Yeah.
we'll do it that way,
Yeah.
And so I think it's just the timing of when does it work to take a risk. And for me, it's now or never before we do the whole kid thing. Not that you can't take risks while you have kids, but it was just like this
Yeah.
perfect moment.
Yeah.
And really, it was once I came up with the idea, also wanting to pursue it. So how can I make it work? And you just find a way.
Yeah. And he was 100% supportive.
Yes.
That's so cool.
And I think it was because it's using my background and my skills. And
Yeah.
I did an example for him, and he was like, this is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
you should do this. And he would tell me, like, I trust his opinion. He'd
Yeah.
say, this isn't really going to work.
Yeah.
He was like, wow, that's, I haven't heard anything like that. You
Yeah.
should do this. And so I'm super lucky that he is absolutely supportive. And when I launched it, he was like talking about it at work and telling everybody, like, telling people, like, you have to listen to this.
Yeah.
You have to spread the word.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
That's so cool. Did you have like a social media following or anything like that? Like, how did you get your initial viewers or listeners?
Yeah, so not as much as I should have.
Yeah.
Like looking back, it
Yeah.
wasn't enough of a priority because I was so caught up in just telling good stories on TV. And then also I was moving around. So
Yeah.
the audiences were changing. But I think it was some of that, like the small following that kind of kept with me even after I left TV. And then it was just word spreading, honestly. It was people liked it and it became part of their habit. And so then they would post about it on their Facebook. And then like I have all these old high school acquaintances that like saw it on my Facebook and started watching or listening and then posting it on theirs, and then their friends started listening.
Yeah.
And because when something becomes like your daily habit, because it's Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
it's something that you talk about. And when you like think of when somebody's in conversation and you're like, oh, I heard about that. Did you hear about this aspect? And it becomes this, oh yeah, I heard about it on the Newsworthy. And so
Yeah.
then somebody knows about it, and then
Yeah.
so it's just spread. But that said, the last 4 months was really for me to kind of test it out and make sure people love it. And I've gotten awesome feedback and some hardcore listeners.
Yeah.
And so now this year for me is when I really take it to the next level.
Yeah. And what's that like? That means just adding different
Just
segments,
growing.
different structure, different like the way you do it, just growing it.
Growing it, doing, because I didn't really do a lot of marketing or anything like
Yeah.
that. And so now it's okay, how can I get the word out? Because I know people that are listening love it.
Yeah.
And it's this unique type of news. How can I let more people know that it exists and
Yeah.
just blow it up? So
That's so cool. What is your biggest like platform for it from iTunes? Like where do the
yeah,
majority of your listeners come from?
yeah.
Got it. Do you
And
do
because
video?
I was featured on iTunes, and that helped.
Got it. That
So
helps
yeah,
massively.
that's a good point of where did all my listeners come from?
Yeah.
I was new and noteworthy,
Yeah.
and then I was also under for a while. They don't have it anymore, but for a while before the holidays, they had just a daily news category on the front page.
Got
So I was like next to the New York Times, the Daily, and
So
NPR
cool.
is up first. And so that was huge also.
Yeah, it's huge. Because also a lot of people now hit me up, even my friends, asking how to build and grow a podcast. And obviously, I have my way that I did it, but it's very similar to yours. I had a big social following, but one of the most helpful things was the new and noteworthy.
Yeah.
And I hit them up like once every couple months, and like, hey, can I be new and noteworthy again?
Yeah.
Like just to try, right?
Yep.
And then just legitimately spreading the word and like
Yeah.
putting out good content and letting it just build, is so important. And like, it took me, because I had a pretty big social media following, but my first 10 episodes were like, I don't know, 1,000 listens or something.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, like this is terrible. Nobody wants to hear me talk. This is not my platform. I'm done, But I committed in my head to doing it for 1 year,
Yes.
and just as a project. I looked at it as a project. Like I'm going to interview once a week, a successful person for a year. That's all I'm going to do. And then finally it caught on to where now there's weeks or times that I'll take off or want to take off that I'll feel too much pressure because people actually want to hear it now,
Right.
And so that's a good place to be. But my other question is, do you film it?
Not right now.
Okay. Are you
Again,
going to in the future?
probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I could even see a situation where I'm like partnering with a Hulu type thing or an
Yeah.
Amazon where I'm providing video updates for people that it's on demand.
Yep. And is it all on your own right now?
Yes.
There's no partner, no nothing?
I worry about admitting that. But yeah,
That's a great thing.
yeah.
I think in today's day and age, that's even better. I was having a conversation with a friend last night because we were reading, we were skimming through the 48 Laws of Power and by Robert Greene. And one of the things is like, always be sort of elusive and never talk about how hard it was to accomplish anything. And I was making a point that I think that social media and where we're at in 2018 has just changed that law. I think that
Yes.
now people want to relate. They want to know that you're doing it yourself. They want to know that you're producing the story, that you're looking it up. They want to really hear your voice and say, this is somebody who's passionate about this, and that's why I get my news from her. As opposed to like, that's why a lot of people are turning away from the big news giants because it feels manipulated or it feels like there's
Right.
something else to it or it's not personal, and I think
Right.
that's a really cool part. That's why I love doing this show because I try to pull out how hard it is or
Right.
what makes you human, not what takes you away from being untouchable, right?
Especially because with social media, everything, everything looks so perfect.
Yeah.
You are just giving your highlights a lot of times.
Yeah, I think people
And
are
so
sick of that.
they're so sick of that. And
Yeah.
I know people who have I'm not even going to get on social media because it's just, I like don't feel good after I look,
No,
like about
terrible.
myself after I look at it. So I agree that you
Yeah.
have to put out the vulnerabilities. So yeah, I do it and I am working hard at it.
So
And
cool.
I definitely want to get to a place where I can have help and, focus on the bigger picture things.
Yeah.
But right now I'm just using, again, I couldn't just do it like out of college. Like I had to have that 10 years of knowing
Yeah.
news and being a journalist to be able to do it the right way
Yep.
and be up there, on that daily news category next to those big news organizations.
Yeah.
But but I'm still, at the end of the day, I'm grinding and I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's so cool. So cool. Do you do it at your house? Just
Yeah, I have
random
a home
stuff. So I'm just
office, home
yeah.
studio. Yeah.
That's so nice. So you just like do you just let me ask you this. What is your sort of routine for doing it? Like, do you wake up
Yeah.
every morning, check the stories, put together your thing, do it? How's that look?
Yeah, so I wake up and I do all the other stuff first.
Mhm.
So I am doing all the social media, any marketing that I'm trying to start, any networking, sponsorships, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And this time is kind of changing, but sometime in late afternoon,
Yep.
I switch to doing the podcast,
Mhm.
and then I just start looking at all the news, really taking a wide variety of perspectives on each story. So I'm reading multiple articles on every story, and then I'm bringing it down to
Mhm.
the most like the highlight parts and making it in a casual, fun way.
Yep.
And then I write all that. And then by about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, Pacific time,
Yep.
I track it.
Yep.
I go to the studio and record it. And then I edit it. And then I publish it by 1 in the morning,
Yeah.
Pacific time, so that it's available by 4 in the morning Eastern time by
Yep.
the time people wake up on the East Coast.
Yep.
And so it's giving you all the day's news in the last 24 hours in a very bite-sized, convenient way, all in less than 10 minutes. So people can wake up, get a wide variety of stories, everything from politics to tech and business and entertainment, because that's part of it not being so depressing, right? Is to
Yeah.
give them not just the alarmist stuff that you
Not
get
just
from a
Trump.
lot of, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of that, but
Yeah.
it's also, fun stuff. How is Amazon going to be changing next week? And
Yeah.
what's happening with your iPhone, or what's happening with, um, whatever it is, net neutrality, all
Yeah.
that stuff affects your life.
Yep.
And so it's important to include.
That's cool. You're doing a lot of work. Because you also have to know, I mean, I'm just guessing, you have to like net neutrality, for instance. I know it's not good. I know it's scary. I know people don't like it. But
Exactly. That's why it's so
yeah.
important to be listening to something. And it's a podcast, so you can
Yeah.
be doing other stuff.
Yeah.
You listen for less than 10 minutes. And I don't mean
So
to be
true.
like a commercial here,
No,
but I
be
just
a
get passionate
no,
about
that's
it
great.
because these are the conversations that had me starting it. Because
Yeah.
everybody's heard of net neutrality. Do you know what it is?
I just
Like,
know it's
how
bad.
could it impact you?
Yep.
So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
That's so cool. But yeah, that's a lot of work. Because that's
Yeah.
what I was saying is like I know I've skimmed some things, but I didn't retain any information. Whereas you have to go through and actually understand it so that when
Yeah.
you're saying it, you're not just, you know,
And that's why this was so great for me, because I was, they say, are you uniquely positioned to do
yeah,
something,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that was me. I wanted to tell stories in a fun way, but I had this background. And so it was the opportunity for me to do what I felt like I could do best that maybe other people couldn't do, for that. It's being a journalist and doing it in a fun way, in a
Yeah.
casual way.
That's so cool. Um, so there's not a piece of you, this is a stupid question, but that regrets doing it or is scared, or I mean, you have to feel more like in control and better than ever.
I feel it's so even more rewarding
Yeah.
when you hear awesome stuff from people that they like miss it when it's not on
Yeah.
Saturday. Like they wake up and they want to hear a Saturday version because it's only Monday through Friday.
Yep.
Or how, oh, this is, wasn't informed before and now I feel so informed and it's such a fun way. So like those things are so rewarding that it totally motivates me. Like
Yeah.
it's when I get featured or hear feedback from people. But there's definitely still a fear
Yeah.
of I still want to grow it. I
Yeah.
still want it to go to the next level.
Yeah.
So sure, that sits with me, but again, it's weighing the benefits and the consequences
Yeah.
and saying I want to look back at the end of 2018 and know that I gave it everything.
Yeah.
And hopefully it turns out the way that I want, and that it just continues to grow.
Yeah.
But if not, like I want to look back and say I know that I gave it my all.
Yeah. That's what I think too people underestimate about doing your own thing is like, sure, everyone sees like your wins are all your wins. Like I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a blah 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 because like it's yours and nobody tells me what to do.
Right.
But your losses and your fears are all yours. You know what I mean? Like you don't have
Yes.
anyone to rely on to say, well, even if I drop the ball in 2018, at least my team probably has it figured out. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
if you
right.
drop the ball is dropped and it's screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you're also, when you're the only one that fails because of it, it's a little like
True.
you do want to succeed, but no one's relying on you necessarily.
That's
I
true.
mean, to a point.
True. No, true, true. It's just the ability that you can absolutely like implode your own world. There's no
Yes.
safety, you know?
Right. I
Which
would
is what
say
I
this is
love.
even scarier than
Yeah.
moving to Portland or moving
Well, it
where,
has to
moving to
be.
LA. This 100%.
And you're never done, right? So
Yes.
2019, you're gonna have to have a whole new set of like plans and strategies, right?
Right.
Like it's never, oh, you can't ever just rest in getting slow raises.
I would definitely say for the person that does like continuously doing something new and continuously challenging themselves,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship is the way to go
Yeah.
because you do always have to be innovating and thinking and testing things out and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas in my job, I was okay. Well, am I going to get a promotion, and that's going to be the way that I improve
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah.
To take it to the next
It
level.
doesn't matter if you go above and beyond and do something crazy, new, and innovative. It's like you might get a raise at best.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you don't change you can change your life doing this thing. Like you could start
Yeah.
doing video, get it picked up by Hulu. Now you have this whole other thing that's all yours, you know? That's the part
Exactly.
I'm so addicted to.
There's no ceiling.
There's none.
Yeah.
And you reap every like you can change your own life instead of somebody else's,
Yeah.
right? I don't know. Okay, so because you're so incredibly ambitious and you have such a good sort of inner compass, my question is, like, what's next, or where does this go over the next 10 years? I know that that's
Oh,
incredibly
yeah.
hard to say for sure, but I mean, if right now you could sit and map it out however you wanted to, how does that progress over the next 10 years?
Yeah. I think it turns into a multimedia organization that continues to grow and partners with other organizations to bring on every platform, right? So
Yep.
podcast, video, because people do want everything on demand, that
Yep.
I want to provide that for them in a more fun, convenient way in whatever platform they want to use.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's like the biggest thing for me
Yeah.
is, and then just innovating as how people consume news
Yep.
continues to change and being the lead of that, as people maybe want it in a different way, is taking my organization that I've built and saying, how can we give that to them?
Yeah.
And so it's not knowing exactly what that looks like in
Yeah.
10 years because we probably don't know how we're going to consume news in 10
Yeah,
years.
you'll be like a virtual reality,
Yeah.
like in people's living rooms, like, hello, it's me, I'm back. Scary.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, you'll be like popping up on a hologram.
Well,
Like,
have you seen like
oh,
I think it is CNN that did that once in the studio?
they did a hologram?
I think so.
Ah,
It
that's
was
so
a little
cool.
odd.
I knew, yeah. I'm telling you, that's gonna be the future. This is gonna be people sitting in their little like docks at home and like, well, let's see what the news is saying.
Right.
And you're gonna pop up in their living room.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you some of these questions because these are the other ones that I'm sort of fascinated by as I get older and sort of evolve my productivity. Do you have any sort of daily morning routine, like for like productivity or anything like that?
So I'm really trying to get it down
Yeah,
still because
same.
my life is so different since before I would wake up and do my routine and then have an hour commute to Studio City and all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
now it's like I'm working from home. I kind of have to change my routine. And one of the things I have gotten into is 10 minutes to meditate.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
How
I
long have you been doing that?
really just since I started this because
Yep.
it was so much more scary.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
so
you need something
that
to
I
calm your
needed
brain.
something to like calm myself
Yeah,
and get into a headspace that I can do this.
yeah.
Um,
It's so true. That's new to me too. The last year probably. But yeah, it just came from like sort of evolving and seeing that this is a reoccurring thing in almost every high achiever's life, right? They
yeah.
all do it. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to be the only one trying to prove a point. But it's hard. It's a hard
Yeah, it is.
habit to get into. How do you do it with an app on your phone?
Yeah. So, and I don't do it every morning, but
Yeah.
for me, it's like all I need is 10 minutes. Like some
Okay.
people do 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I just 10 minutes.
Yep.
I can take 10 minutes while my coffee's brewing,
Same.
and I use an app that helps me because it's guided and someone's talking to me.
Yep.
I like that version.
Yep.
People like different ones.
What app is it?
It's called Insight.
Got it.
It's just free, and
Yep.
they have all different ones on there. And
Yep.
so I like that. And I always feel more positive and just calm
Yeah.
throughout the day. And I can tell working out and meditating are two things that I can tell if I haven't done it in a couple days,
So true.
it affects me.
Yep.
So yeah, and then I always try to get a workout in, but I usually try to do some work first and really, because you have so much motivation in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I'll do a little meditation, coffee, and then I'll dive into work. My husband and I usually do breakfast because he works from home too.
How nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of our moment more
You
than
guys work
anything
from
because
home
I
at
work
the
at night.
beach? That's incredible.
I know.
That's so dream come true.
But I will say I had to get used to working from home because I used to
Yeah.
be out and about, like throughout the city of Los Angeles and beyond. Like we would go
Yeah.
as far as Inland Empire and Ventura County. And I was constantly talking to people and I was outside and all of a sudden I was working from home. And so that's also, I have to, okay, I'm going to go work out,
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a run, I'm going to get outside. And then I'm going to, when I have a networking opportunity, let's go get lunch. Let's go, get outside, get out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think people don't realize that.
It's true.
It's such a benefit to work from home, but
Yeah.
you also have to, it's an adjustment for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I'll dive into work and then usually about noon, I'll go take a workout class. And then I come back and do more work because once I dive into the podcast, it's,
Game over.
yeah.
Yeah. What about do you have any favorite? Are you a big reader or no?
Yes, especially with becoming an entrepreneur and getting into the business side of things, podcasts and business books have been good for me. But I will say I'm trying to be better about fitting it in because once you get busy and because I don't relax at night, I'm doing my podcast at
Yeah.
night, you let it go by the wayside.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I've started scheduling in my calendar like reading time as if
Smart.
it's a meeting, and I
Yeah.
just do not allow myself to do anything unless it's something so pressing. I do it usually in the morning actually, but sometimes at night too. And unless there's something so pressing, I make sure that I do it because similar to working out and meditating, I've learned that I'm more productive if I do these basic things,
Right.
right? Like if I work out, meditate, read, do these baseline things that keep me like sane,
Yeah.
then the time that I do spend actually working, I'm way more productive.
Right.
So I try. It's not easy. I fight for some reason. I fight myself as if I'm like my own school teacher. Like I fight like authority, right? Like no, I'm not going to do that because it's on my calendar. Like it's stupid. But that's the closest thing I've learned to making it doable is like scheduling an hour where you just sit and read, and that's all you have to do.
For me, I'm trying to be better about reaching for a book instead of my phone first
Yeah.
thing in the morning because actually that motivates me. If it's a business book, I read like a few pages and I'm like, okay, now I'm ready,
Yeah, so true.
Whereas if I'm scrolling on Instagram, it's like,
You're like, oh, I hate myself.
yeah.
Literally. Do you have any favorites? Any favorite book, podcast, documentary, anything like that you would recommend?
Sure. So I just finished reading what is it, 10X by Grant Cardone,
Yeah.
which was really motivating for me because I'm starting the Newsworthy, and so I got to do everything I can. It's just all about having bigger goals and
Yeah.
working even harder, and so that was a good one for me to pick up in the morning when I really wanted to get motivated. What the two podcasts that inspired me and got me into podcasts in the first place that I used to listen on my commute was Tim Ferriss's,
Yeah, of course.
The Tim Ferriss Show,
Yeah.
and then because I had hour-long commutes, so I wanted that,
Yeah.
and then Chris Guillebeau's Side Hustle School.
Yeah, I've seen that, but I've never listened to it.
Yeah, so like mine, they're short. They're like 10 minutes long.
Yep.
And it's at the time I was still had a normal job. And so it was just really motivating to hear all these people that were doing their own thing on the side.
Mhm.
For me, I ended up turning it into my the whole
Full time.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really inspiring for me, and it's been cool because I actually met Chris Guillebeau and he left a review for my podcast,
so cool.
and he was awesome and shared it on Twitter, and so yeah, so he was an inspiration, and then to actually
Yeah.
have him interact with it was really cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, here's one I like. What is your favorite failure? Do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it's those moments that I just messed up in my first job.
Mhm.
But knowing that I kept showing up the next day.
Mhm.
Um,
Do you think it taught you
yeah,
perseverance?
it taught me that you have to go through those moments to get to the next level. Because now that when I took it to the next level, I was able to look back at those moments and say, oh, I needed that. I hated it in the moment.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
horrible. I was crying all the time.
Mhm.
But I needed to go through that to get to where I am now.
Yep. So true. Um,
And I'm trying to remind myself that, like, if something doesn't go perfect with the newsworthy, I'm like trying to think back at those moments, like, okay, I'm just in it. I'm in the beginning, you know?
yeah, that's the hard part. You know, the hard part is like you can have the perspective from far away and be
Yeah.
like, oh, that was so cool, and I can't believe I learned perseverance through that, and blah blah blah, and then something happens tomorrow, and you're like, oh, it's the end of the world. You know, like it's so hard to like, oh, okay, just remember this is just another one of those.
Exactly.
You know?
And there's such ups and downs with entrepreneurship. Like, you get featured or something happens and you're like, it's the best thing in the world. And
Yeah.
then you have like a slow plateau moment or something and you're
Yeah.
just like, why am I even doing this?
So that is my whole life. My whole life is like alternating between thinking that I'm like my life is gonna end tomorrow and I'm gonna
Right.
work at a Starbucks in Akron, Ohio, or I'm Puff Daddy. It literally just depends on what happens that day. You know?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
one or the other.
Right.
And I've also found this may sound a little too like, philosophical, but like there's a failure is sort of one thing and one level of like damage, which is actually no damage depending on how you look at it.
Right.
But sort of accepting the failure or letting the failure affect how you make your next move is where the actual damage is done. And I think that for me, the most clarity that comes from looking back at those moments and saying those moments didn't actually affect me in no way. Like they didn't affect, what did they affect? They didn't affect anything. It might have hurt. It might have been like an ego kick or whatever, but
Right.
it didn't actually affect my life. When you actually affect your life is when you make the next move wrong because of that, or don't make the next move because of that.
I
Right?
would say, if anything, it affects your life in a positive way when you
Yeah.
fail
Yeah.
because you learned from it. I mean, and that goes for career and personal life. Like, there were there were a couple of relationships that I'm really glad I had because I learned a lot from them, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't be happy and like decided to marry Dan if
Yeah.
I didn't go through those bad relationships. And
Yep.
so it's personal and career where you learn a lot from failures, and I think it affects you in a positive way.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's shocking. This is going to sound negative too. It's shocking how little the victories matter also. Meaning,
Right.
you can't rest on those either. Like you kind of said, like
Yeah.
you'll have a big win and you'll have an incredible day. And don't get me wrong, you'll go home at night and you'll feel like $1,000,000 and you'll sleep like an angel. But like the next day or 2 days later, it's over. And it's how do you get back? And I feel like even now in this social media, episode a week that you're doing or episode a day that you're doing, uh, everything is so disposable that your little wins matter even less, right? Because they're forgotten about the next day unless you can be consistent.
And I think that goes back to, you have to trust yourself to handle it all because the
Mhm.
success isn't going to stick around and the failure isn't going to stick around.
Yeah.
No matter what, something's going to change. And so it's being able to go with the flow, make changes when necessary, and not get too high or too low about anything.
Yeah. So good. Okay, here's my big ender. If you could go back to your childhood self, um, let's say you're in the phase where you're kind of hopping around dance class, you're just doing everything under the sun. You're liking it, but you're trying to kind of figure it all out. Now, all of this stuff, wins and losses, everything, traveling, living in all these different cities that you've been through, if you could tell that little younger version of yourself anything to sort of give them a gem or make life a little easier going forward, what would you tell little you?
Believe you can do it
Mhm.
along the way. Because in those moments when you're failing and you just want to give up, I may have kept going, but there were definitely moments that I had a lot of self-doubt
Yeah.
or, I just was too hard on myself about things that didn't end up mattering. And so it's just believe you can keep doing it. And I didn't stop, but have fun along the way,
Yeah.
like,
That's a hard one for me.
yeah,
Like I've had to learn that.
yeah,
'Cause I took it so serious.
right.
And everything defined me, the wins and the losses. And so it's like you don't remember to just like, who cares? Let's have some fun. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I also think once again, it's the same point. It's like if you continue to believe you can do it, that is simply the difference whether you do it or not,
Right.
right? Because the moment you stop believing you can do it is when you just stop doing it,
Right.
right? And I think that you're a good testament of taking losses and having wins, but never letting either one keep you complacent.
Right.
And that's a really good lesson I think to learn is like to get your dream job in LA and quit a year later. there's so much in that, just as much as is in if you would have had some tragic failure that you came back from. I think
Right.
overcoming a loss is sometimes less important than overcoming a win, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's just like a company that's really popular. They have to keep innovating or soon they're not going
Yeah.
to be heard of.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with your career and your life. And I even though once you get married, you can't just stop caring about that relationship. I think it's all aspects have to be just
Yeah.
constant. But
So true.
yeah, and have fun.
And have fun. Okay, here's the part where you shout out everything, shamelessly plug, tell everyone where to go, tell them who to follow, tell them all that stuff.
Yeah, so thenewsworthy.com is where you can check out the podcast, or you can just search for it wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, whatever. On Instagram and Twitter, I'm the NW Podcast. That stands for the Newsworthy Podcast. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Erica Mandy.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time
Thank
to
you
do this.
so much for having me on the
That was
show.
really good.
So fun.
Yes, keep me updated. I'm going to subscribe,
Thank you.
but keep me updated on everything.
I will.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye. All right, there it was. I hope you enjoyed it. Erica Mandy. She killed it. I'm really glad she came on and did that podcast. It was really inspiring. Her whole story, the way that she just kind of went out on her own and followed her instincts and made her dreams come true, is pretty insane. And it's just a testament to how podcasting and kind of doing media yourself is truly, undeniably, not only the future, but the present. As always, don't forget to leave me some positive feedback. Tell me how much you like it. Tell me who you'd like to hear on the show, who you didn't like. But just leave me 5 stars. If you're going to say something negative, just at least leave me 5 stars so I still get the positive rating on the charts. Thank you. Subscribe to my YouTube, youtube.com/dramadrama. And go to youngandreckless.com and get 40% off all full-priced items with the promo code SSL. Thank you guys so much. I'll be back next week.